Welcome to another episode of Over Yonder, which is an initiative of the Gain Center for the Humanities, where we interview Kentucky artists and scholars about social distancing during the pandemic. And although she may not consider herself to be an artist, having eaten at many of your restaurants, I would say you have a gift. So we would like to welcome today chef and entrepreneur Ouita Michel, and former Gaines Fellow, to this episode of Hi Ouita. So, one of the questions I started asking people in the beginning because of an interesting exchange I had with James, but now I think that we have gotten such a wide variety of answers that one of the questions I ask is this your first pandemic?
Yes. Yes, initially my first pandemic. I did have the chicken pox when I was a kid, but no, I never saw this coming. I think that people who were more scholarly than I about the risks of global health, I think, did see it coming, but wasn't ever anything I ever thought about. I mean, I'm a victim of our current society where I knew about Ebola, I saw the risks, but I never thought anything would ever come to Kentucky.
Yeah.
I felt, okay, that stuff is for other places.
That's right.
The giant urban areas, we're not going to get that in Kentucky.
I remember after September 11th, listening to an interview, like in the first few days, of these people who lived in Joliet, Illinois. And the interviewer was asking them about their feelings in the wake of the terrorist attack. And the person said, that could happen here. We have a nuclear power plant in Joliet. And I thought to myself, those people are insane. No one cares about Joliet, Illinois. But it turns out that we are much more connected than I gave the people in Joliet credit for being. So one of the questions that I'm excited to ask you, which is because of the work that you do, is there's a current kind of obsession, not obsession, but necessity that we return to the kitchen, right? And that has led to so much conversation, discussion, worry, anxiety about cooking, and the big, I like to call it the flour kerfuffle of 2020 about people ordering the yeast absence that went on for a while. And I was wondering, as a person who has dedicated her life to food and feeding people, what you think about all of the current talk around food.
Well, I think the thing that makes me the happiest is that talk is now translating itself into actually action. One of the things I've never liked is this whole obsession with treating good food and kitchens as just another commodity. It became fully integrated into our lives, because I didn't grow up that way. Obviously, my mom was a fantastic cook. My grandmother was a fantastic cook, and the kitchen was the heart of our home. And not in a traditional way. I mean, I started cooking as a teenager because my mom got a job and went to work. But so I love it. I have been cooking huge amounts of food at home. I have loved every minute of it. I've tried to do a lot of things that I have always wanted to cook and not really done a lot of cooking in the home. So I myself have done tons of cooking, but I think it's fantastic. It's the best thing we can do to make ourselves feel better. I know probably not healthy from a psychological standpoint. The food is love thing can get you into trouble too. But I think it's a great way to show our care and concern for ourselves and for the people that we live with and our loved ones. So
one of the things, which is of course sad for people in your line of business, I've discovered, is that eating at home makes us feel better. Like if you take a healthy approach to it,
Yeah.
It can be a healthy and beneficial thing for us right now. I mean, there's a mixture of the good and the bad, but probably um, given the kind of food you can get quickly in this country, for some people, not having access to quick food could have a different kind of health benefit.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about sodium levels.
Right.
I think that's the number one health benefit, that creating something from scratch at home, like not necessarily everything that you buy in the grocery store, this be true, but if you're using in general whole foods that you're creating at home, and if you're making your own spaghetti sauce, for example, not have to, you can buy a jar, but making your own is going to reduce the amount of sugar and salt,
Mm-hmm.
and categorically across all foodstuffs, and especially when you're talking about restaurant cooking. And restaurant cooking, I don't feel bad about. Like I feel like I've always been a proponent of home cooking because it can give to a person's sense of well-being, and especially for kids, it gives the idea that they can take care of themselves, and it builds confidence. It's a confidence thing that, oh, I can make myself an egg. I can, and it gives you this way of navigating that's when you're little, when you're 10 years old, when you're 9 years old, the idea that you can go into the kitchen at any time and make yourself something good to eat, like a fried egg and a piece of toast. I feel like that's kind of a game changer for you. And so, yes, cooking at home, back to your original question, yes, cooking at home can be a lot healthier, even when you're making caloric foods. Working from that, you get so many more micronutrients. I've been cooking tons out of my herb garden. I have put in a victory garden here at Holly Hill. So I've got vegetables back and beautiful herb garden. And so all those herbs in your food, they have, like, parsley has more nutrients in it than broccoli. I mean, you can really load your cooking up with these things that are great for you. Onions and garlic being one of them. You know, I feel like I've been ingesting huge quantities.
Yes.
Look, lately in Indian cooking, I added to. I mean, I'm not just eating raw garlic, but last night I love Indian cooking, so I made chicken korma, and it takes me a long time. We often eat late, which isn't so great. It takes me a long time to get everything ready. But you think about that dish, making it home versus going to an Indian restaurant for it. It has yogurt and all those spices and garlic and lots of onions and then fresh tomato. But you're not using any, you're not, a lot of times in restaurant cooking, you're using so much fat in what you're cooking because fat makes cooking quicker, that it can be bad for you. So you get quite a bit of leeway there.
So one of the things that I have been thinking about that has come to mind, and it reminds me of a really wonderful, I think it was the first time I actually came to know you separate from your restaurants, was when you interviewed Ruth Reichel
Oh, yeah.
for the Kentucky Women Writers Conference, which was fantastic because it was the perfect balance of like knowledgeable interviewer and fangirl. It was like,
I was so scared. I've never been so nervous. I'm not a nervous person. My heart was in my throat during that entire time because I really am
yeah.
a fake girl of hers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I knew her first from her books, Tender at the Bone. More than I knew her from the newspaper, to be honest. So it was a really great interview. But one of the things that she said that stuck with me is that as Americans cooked less, for some reason, the sale of cookbooks went up. Do you remember when she said that? And now I keep thinking, because I've ordered several cookbooks, like I think somewhere over my shoulder is My Paris Kitchen. And I ordered several cookbooks. I was wondering I keep thinking to myself to check if cookbook sales are going up at the same time as well, because people are really experimenting with other cuisines similar to your experimentation, to your cooking Indian food.
Yes, and I just got 4 new books myself. So yeah, and one of those was an Indian book. One's a Korean home food cookbook. Now for me, I use books. I mean, I love to research, and I love to read because I feel like it gives me a really good cookbook can also take me to a place. And one of the things that might be happening at this time for us, homebound, we're town bound, we're not traveling, and we're losing that connection that we have to other cultures. Books, when they're well written, can really reestablish those cultures for us.
Yes.
That's definitely a place. And I also love books that take me back in time. So I like cookbooks for both reasons.
Mm-hmm.
A local resident here in Midway died in her 90s. This was just before we went through COVID shutdown, or just after, actually. So in March. Mm-hmm. And she had a collection of 500 books that her family did not want to see lost. So they gave them to her. And every one of them is a community cookbook. They're not the big hardbound books. They're the spiral bound books. Every one of them is a community cookbook, literally from every small community that she visited in Kentucky, from all over the state.
That's amazing.
And it's amazing. They're sitting next to me in these bins. I've got shelves that I just built at Holly Hill for them. But what they do is they take a church, for example, a little Baptist church in Mount Vernon or wherever, and though that one congregation, and it gives you a provenance for each recipe, so it can take you to a particular place. And I love that about cookbooks too, and a particular time. And that may be one reason that cookbook sales are so strong. Mm-hmm. I worry that we just we're only expressing our food culture through writing and through media now, online, through Twitter accounts and blogging and through cookbook writing, and that we're not really expressing our food culture through cooking. So it makes me really happy that people are cooking, because it's dead if it's just something we're writing about. Or the other thing too about that Ruth Reichel interview was that we are cooking more and more. Millions of Americans are cooking. They're just cooking in commercial kitchens. Oh. They're not in home kitchens. And I worry all the time, because our young commercial kitchens, and they're getting out of those commercial kitchens.
Oh, wow. The University of Texas at San Antonio has just put online, apparently they have one of the largest collections of Mexican cookbooks. They just digitized appetizers and desserts, and now they're in the process of digitizing main courses. So you can go on and look up how to make aguas frescas, or how to make flan, or other kinds of desserts that I had never even heard of. So it's really, really great. So at some point, we should think about connecting you to the University of Kentucky Archives, because
I would love that.
That would be a great archival project. I'm probably going to edit that part out too. So, okay. So the other question, no. If you could recommend, let's say, 3 cookbooks that would be good to have in your pandemic cooking library, what would they be? I mean, these could be cookbooks from before, but what would those cookbooks be?
I always, let's say for the Kentucky cook.
Okay.
Out of Kentucky Kitchens by Marion Flexner.
Mm-hmm.
The Heritage of Southern Cooking by Camille Glenn. Mm-hmm. And The Joy of Cooking. Every cook needs to have the joy of cooking. I have multiple editions, but it is really for the basics, that's the best book you can ever have.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So this is sort of a weird question for you, because almost everybody who I speak with, they work at a desk. But this is actually a good question, because knowing you some, I know that you have access to really great professional kitchens. So since you have been doing all this much more home cooking, did you already have a working space, or did you have to do some reconfiguring of your home workspace to get it to be what you need?
Okay, let me be clear. I I I do not have a fancy kitchen at home. I have a very humble space. I have a humble home, but it suits me. I like it, and I've always liked kind of a small kitchen because that way everything's right, kind of where you want it. So I have. I would like to redo my kitchen, but I think I'm probably not going to have the money for quite some time. but but I have made the best with what I have. And I'm also a person that likes to wash their dishes by hand. I love washing dishes. And I don't do it after dinner. I can't stand washing dishes after dinner. So I pile all the dishes up and I clean, put away the food, pile the dishes up. And then in the morning, I get up and I listen to NPR and I wash dishes. And it sort of sets me straight for the day. But I have a good gas stove and I have a Vitamix blender. I have a good collection of cast iron and a nice wok and some good knives. And that's about what I've got. And a small countertop, but it's just me, Chris, and Willa. So I'm not making a lot of food. It's a luxury. I enjoy it. One reason I love cooking at home is because I don't have to cook for 100 or anything. I can just make a small amount.
Yeah. So I think that I know that your restaurants have been open during the pandemic because I've eaten at them. I want to thank you for that. And but I know that you have been working, collaborating with local farmers, and I think one weekend on the menu at Holly Hill there was like flowers and maybe a candle or something, and I was like, next there's going to be like soap and dry goods, but it's really kind of wonderful. But it made me think about, so one of the questions I've been asking are about home remedies and what kinds of home remedies, because we're all concerned about, if not illness, the potential for illness. So I'm going to ask you, what are any home remedies that you remember? But then also, what have been some of the remedies that you have been coming up with to help deal with the impact of COVID-19 on the restaurant industry? I know that you have been an advocate for trying to figure out ways to keep those businesses alive.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started, it was a very short-lived, was supposed to be a short-lived experience when we started going through the shutdown. Now we're into the 5th month. And so we will need these remedies in the coming months. As we move into fall and winter, it's going to be very, very difficult in the restaurant industry. So I'm hopeful that the Restaurant Act can pass. That's what I've really been advocating for. But honestly, our government has to support small. I mean, that's really my true passion. It's not just restaurants, but it could be farmers or small businesses. I mean, I think sometimes people are shocked, at least I was, that I'm a micro business and I'm a fairly big group,
Mm-hmm.
but most small businesses in the United States are like $20 million in revenue. I mean, really, who does that? It's like most small business people I know are not doing $20 million. So we have these differing definitions of what small business entails. I worry constantly for restaurateurs who are much small. I have the luxury of having a very accomplished business partner and a series of investors, all of whom helped us connect to the right loans, to getting that emergency funding. But I could not have done that in the early days of Holly Hill Inn, because when we first opened Holly Hill Inn, it was me and Chris, and that was it. And we were working ourselves the bone, just operating that restaurant every day. And if you're in that position today where you have one restaurant and you're doing everything to keep them open, how are you finding the time to connect to these government programs? And then how are you going to pay those loans back? I think those are the things that I'm the most worried about. So the grant programs that Lexington's put together that you could apply for through the Commerce Lexington, et cetera, I think those are very important. But from a federal level, we have the capacity to give grants to the small business community, and specifically, I'm advocating for small restaurants um, to get those grants to protect that part of our food culture. It's really important. A lot of those restaurants are minority owned, or they're ethnic restaurants that protect a certain kind of food that if it's gone, it's probably gone out of the market for a long time. So it's just important to protect those businesses, and it's how people get to work every day.
So could you tell us about a home health remedy?
A
Like,
home health
when
remedy.
somebody in your, like, we need to either strengthen you or you have been sick. Did your parents have any remedies that they used to do?
Well, yes. So in our family, you're going to laugh. My mother was a big proponent of garlic lemonade, which was, oh, look at your face. Well, it was just a small shot. It wasn't like a big glass that we had to drink. Clove of garlic and press it into, kind of like a lemon juice and warm water and a spoonful of sugar and garlic. And then and also she was a proponent of raw apple cider vinegar, that every day. And I'm a big, I'll tell you what I pack my cooking with: onions and garlic and turmeric, lots of different spices, capsaicin. All of those things are really, really good for your digestive system. Lots of ginger, and lots of fresh herbs. So I like the aromatics, and they're very good for you. And then tea, lots of different teas are very good for you.
So in dealing with the pandemic as a individual person, what are some of the things you have been doing, the remedies to deal with the social distancing, or the ways in which COVID-19 has changed our lives?
Well, because our restaurant stayed open, I stayed at work. So I haven't had the loneliness that sometimes I think a lot of people have felt. And loneliness, I think, is something we have to think about as a society now, for our young people especially. But for me, so obviously in coping with the pandemic, I wear masks all the time. I got these masks from Lowe's, when they're very nice, really great masks, gloves, hand sanitizer everywhere. And I think the hardest thing for me has been giving up hugging. I know a lot of people say that, but I love to hug people. I also was a big handshaker, a back patter. And so now I wonder sometimes, are we learning new habits to the point where we'll never be able to go back to touching one another? It may be a long time before we can do that, before we feel comfortable, even after a vaccine, doing that. Because I can feel myself changing. If someone comes too close to me, and I'm talking about a stranger in a grocery store. I mean, like, if I'm in the kitchen and one of my employees comes up close to me, just in the process of moving, we're so careful with how we move around each other that it feels strange, and I move away. So all of those issues, we've also done so much cleaning. I've never done so much cleaning in my life. Oh, we're painting and cleaning every restaurant, the bakery. There's so much sanitizing that we've been going through, that it's been, the other side of the coin to cooking is cleaning. And so I have just been nonstop with that kind of thing. And my staff is fantastic. We had to lay some people off, but my core team, my leadership team everywhere, they kept working through this whole thing. And they didn't have to. I mean, they could have taken unemployment, and I'm grateful. Really, I have so many people around me who are dedicated to what they do and what I do, and that's my big remedy. Trying to find ways of connecting to people that I normally wouldn't do. I'm just fine being immersed in my busyness. I use that as a way of personal connection. And now I have a busy schedule still, but not like I did. So it's been nice to just spend a little bit more time. And I'm trying as much as I can. I verbally check in with our team as much as I can. I've been calling a lot of people on the phone.
Yeah.
I never would have done that before, but now I call, how are you doing? Right. You know, I've spent a lot of time on the phone lately.
So, is there anything of the habits you have had to adopt during COVID-19 that you think you might keep?
Oh yeah. Um, well, there's a ton of business practices that I really have enjoyed learning about and I've loved. Um, in terms of, I mean, this whole cooking at home thing, I love. I have more time at home with Chris and Willa now, and I've really loved that. I feel like um, I was forced into letting people do their jobs, my oversight, and it worked out just fine. I'm grateful to that, but I'm also so grateful for the time that it's given me to be able to read or be able to, actually do some thinking. I feel like I was on this path before, just like a gerbil in a wheel, opening restaurant. And now what this done is really focused me and said, well, this is really what I want to do. And it's been a joy at Holly Hill because we're redoing, we're painting, we're finishing the mural, we're finishing these drapes from 5 years ago that never got done. And we're, we took out all this crappy coffee brewing equipment that I've hated for 5 years, and we're going to go to Presspot Coffee. And, we're growing the herb garden and we're going to make homemade bread boards for our cornbread and things like that give me great joy. That were kind of why I started in this business.
Mm-hmm.
I've rediscovered in the process of rethinking. And I think just being more mindful and grateful for everything and slowing down just a minute.
Mm-hmm. So I just thought of this question, which I think I'm going to add, which is largely for myself, but I hope it will benefit whoever watches this video. So one of the things that I love about your restaurants is I feel like you have elevated fried catfish to just what I consider to be, for me, when I invite people, when people I know come to Kentucky and they're like, what should we eat? And I think to myself, they fry a good piece of catfish in Kentucky. So for the home cook who is in search of that crisp piece of fried catfish, do you have any advice whatsoever about how to replicate that at home?
I do. Okay, so
this is, are you joking?
This is from Weisenberger Mill. Yes. We take great catfish in Kentucky. We use wild caught catfish from Kentucky. That's key. And I'm trying to think where you could find it, but that's the key, is to start.
I think it's in Kroger.
So this is, yes, you can buy this at Kroger. It's from Weisenberger Mill, right down the street here. Mm-hmm. And we don't make the batter. So you can make the batter, but we don't do that. We soak the catfish in Budweiser. We put the catfish in beer. Now, some people like to use buttermilk and all that stuff. We just use beer. And then but if you don't want any beer on it, you could maybe put something else, like maybe then you might want to use buttermilk. Mm-hmm. Then we just take this Weisenberger, we call it Weisenberger fish fry.
Yeah.
That's fish batter mix on it, but we don't make the batter. We just roll the catfish in that and then deep fry it. It needs to be about 365 degrees in the fryer. Doing it at home, I would use a deep cast iron skillet and fill it up 2/3 full. And, just drop a little bit of it in there. If it fries, then you can lay it in. Don't move the fish for 4 or 5 minutes and then flip it over and finish frying. But yeah, that's the key. Weisenberger fish fry. I've used it now for 20 years or more.
I'm laughing because I have a friend who just is on her way back from New Orleans. And she was like, what do you want? And I said, I wanted some fish fry and some crawfish boil. And I thought for sure you were going to give me a deep secret. And here it is.
I have it sitting right here on my desk. Isn't that funny?
It is really funny.
That is great. That's our secret. But we do start out with great catfish because when in Vietnam, they started exporting a lot of what they call swale for catfish. And Americans started thinking, oh, that catfish is too, they started thinking American catfish was too gamey or too muddy or too this or too that. And so they started selling that Vietnamese, and it was very cheap. But really, that's not a good fish to buy. It's not always as clean as it should be, and it's mushy. And so when I walked into Windy Corner, this was when we first opened, and the young chef that was opening that restaurant for me had, without my knowledge, started purchasing swale. Mm-hmm. I walked in and I said, well, what's this? Is not catfish. And at that time, we still didn't have a source for Kentucky catfish. We were using, you can buy lots of great farm-raised catfish at Kroger from Alabama, all the down through the South. And so I went ballistic, and I'm like, that is, you cannot sell that as catfish. That's catfish. And then, so when I shifted, they all complained. When I started buying real catfish, everybody was like, this is tough. So I just said, well, this is catfish. We're sticking to it. It took 2 weeks, and then suddenly everybody loved the catfish. Mm-hmm. Anyway, appreciate you saying. I do feel like Kentucky, because when I was growing up, there was Halls on the River, which was famous. They had a lot of different ways you could have catfish down there, and I don't know if they still do. I like that restaurant, but they used to have catfish steaks, and then they had the whole catfish that you could get on the bone, and they had the fillets of catfish, and they really, really had great catfish. And so that has always been a big part of Kentucky's kind of food heritage. So I wanted to make sure we were representing that.
No. Your restaurants fry a good piece of catfish. I'm going to try to replicate now my own. One last question is there anything you would want to say that I haven't asked you about that people watching that you think might be good to say to people in the midst of all that's happening?
Well, I think one of the lessons I've learned the most is that despite all the distance imposed on us from COVID-19, and despite our own stress in managing the economic shutdown and our personal lives, I feel like as a community, we've really come closer together. I didn't know how much any of my restaurants really meant to the community before this happened. I just sort of felt like I was out there. I mean, I've always felt supported by my community or part of my community, but I didn't feel like anything I was doing was that significant. I was just out there running my restaurants, hurdy-gurdy, whatever. And this made me understand both the responsibility that I have to creating something that enriches people's lives. That's where I feel like I've changed maybe over the last 4 months. It's like, well, it's just not good enough to be open for me for business. How does this enrich our lives? If it doesn't, I don't want to do it. And I really feel like this experience has helped me understand that about my path and myself. And it's also helped me see how meaningful the places we've created are for other people. And that's been humbling, and I'm so grateful to it. I feel really fulfilled, honestly.